Hey, aloha, everybody. All right. Thank you very much. To get started with our panel today, we'd like to, of course, thank the people who have put this on and thank everybody who's taken time out of their very busy days. Then we'll introduce ourselves and the mission of each of our organizations, and then I will start, pass it to Leilani, who will pass it to Joe, who will pass it to Ted. You ready? All right, here we go. I'm Maria Tome, Chief Research Analyst with the Consumer Advocates Office, and the mission of our office is to advocate on behalf of Hawaii's consumers in regulatory proceedings in front of the Public Utilities Commission. So we look forward to hearing from you the perspective of the consumers at any time. Thank you very much. Leilani.
Mahalo, Maria. Aloha pumehana kākou, o wau no o Leilani, no Mapulehu Molokai mai au. I am a member of the Molokai Clean Energy Hui, and our purpose is to help Molokai become the clean energy community that we all want to live in. And we are doing this work through facilitating a community-led planning process called the Molokai Community Energy Resilience Action Plan. And the community's vision for this CRAP is to develop a portfolio of renewable energy projects that get our island to 100% renewable energy in a way that is technically feasible, respectful of Molokai's culture and environment, and strongly supported by the community. And the way that this is being made possible is through a planning process that is community-initiated, community-driven, and community-led. All you, Joe.
My name is Joe Kent. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Grassroot Institute of Hawaii. We are a nonprofit economic think tank that focuses on individual liberty, economic freedom, and accountable government. And we have 40,000 people on our email list, followers, 500 donors, hundreds of thousands of people who follow us on social media and voice their opinions to us. We kind of become consumer advocates in a sense. And a lot of our followers have opinions about energy. So.
I'm Ted Peck. I'm the president of Holu Energy. What we do at Holu is develop projects for multi-dwelling units, which are residential clusters either in townhomes or low-income housing or similar systems. And I've been in the energy space for a little while, and pleased to be here with all of you.
Thank you. So, here you see 3 general categories of energy priorities to be discussed by today's panel. As you know, there are many priorities in our communities. Our panelists are supporting the theme of the conference, which is solutions. Easy, right? No? Okay, let's have a discussion. First, between the panelists, going through all 3 of these topics, and then with the audience. Don't forget you've got the app on your phone and can put in your questions or comments, and we'll be able to discuss those at the end. Let's get started with the first one. I would paraphrase that as to be able to come together in support of an energy project in our community, or at least tolerate it. To lead us off, I'm glad to welcome Leilani. Leilani, we're so glad to have you back. Please share with us about the work you and others have done on Molokai.
Sure. Mahalo for having me. All right, so when Molokai first started our journey to be more proactive stewards in the energy space, we quickly realized that the biggest challenges were actually the energy development decision-making process. Some of the issues are what we hear echoed in communities across Hawaii: lack of trust for off-island entities driven by off-island interest, no community voice, cultural values overlooked, and it's hard for the everyday person to stay up to date on our current options. for our energy future. And so Molokai advocated for uninterrupted time, space, and independent technology-neutral expertise. We raised the funds with a lot of help and put together a technical team with a lot of help and got to work designing and testing out a transparent, accountable, education-based process for our island. Have we fixed the process? I don't know. I can't say for sure, but what we do know is what the Molokai Clean Energy Hui and the community has designed works really well for us. We went from a community who has historically opposed every single large-scale renewable energy project ever to designing 10 of our own. And you can see them up on the slide and located across the island. The words are really small, you can't read it, but just know that some of them are mostly solar. They also address our firm energy, clean transportation, all of it holistically. On the bottom are some of our stats for community participation in the last round of CRAP 1.0. Since then, we've added to the discussions we've had in our community. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so one of our biggest challenges after designing our roadmap of what we want is understanding what actually goes into the project development process. This has been like a black box for us, and the solution is here on this screen. Our community requested a visual slide that shows who, what, when, where, why, and how long are all the different pieces from taking a project from 0% conceptual to 100% implemented. You don't have to worry about reading it. Again, like most of you are very familiar with everything that's on the slide, probably more familiar than me. But this was a really good way for our community to start understanding where the questions that are most important to us will be answered. We get a lot of questions about decommissioning, end of life, accountability. We get a lot of questions about, okay, how are these projects going to be funded? How are they going to be rolled out? A lot of questions, especially around the environmental, cultural impacts. And this is a really helpful tool for us to show, like, it will not be skipped, it will be handled right here. So let's focus on the pieces that we got to do before we get there. So I have a little green and yellow arrow on here. We've been working on Molokai CRAP 1.0 and 2.0 for like 4 years now. And we've finally completed project concept, which is high-level siting and sizing. It's taken a long time because we've had to create the process and all of the tools that our community needs. But we're in a really good spot with our top contenders that have strong community support, which is, you know, the main challenge. And we're on to site control coming up soon for the projects that have moved forward. One other thing I want to point out is, you see that red line where it's the dotted line? Everything above that is usually like the pre-development pieces. But through our community discussions, the community has identified that for us to strongly support a project, these other, the geological study, the topographical study, impacts to environment and culture, those all need to happen as part of the pre-development process. And we're willing to show up to make sure that those get done and that we can help guide it. Okay. All right, and this is our second tool that has come out of CRAP 2.0 so far. This addresses the issue of, again, siting and sizing. You know, the whole not in my backyard thing, but on Molokai, the whole island is our backyard. We care deeply about every square inch of this island. And so what we have on the screen is a map that shows our grid interconnection points or areas. Green is easy-ish. All of them, come with a lot of like grid upgrades that are needed in order to plug in a project. Yellow is medium, and red is hard. Everywhere that doesn't have a color is extremely difficult to plug in a renewable energy project. So the technical team did the load flow analysis. They investigated every single bus, node, interconnection point to get this map. I've deleted all of those dots. That's what would be in white. But you can see in blue that these are the areas where the community has landed on our preference for the siting of our projects. And so there's this map that shows grid interconnection preferability, but I'm going to read you the list of what else the community needed to see before we could select our sites. And I think this will be really helpful for you guys. Okay, so of course we wanted to see our grid, transmission and distribution lines, how much energy is used in each area of our island, the regular solar resource map, wind resource map. We wanted to see large landowners, our ahupua'a, where they are, coastal flood zones, fire risk areas, perennial streams and flood zones, land resource maps, moisture zones, ecological reserve lands, historical reserve lands, and agricultural zoning grades. That is what communities need to see for their home before they can strongly support project siting and sizing. So yeah, that's where we're at with CRAP 2.0. Mahalo.
Thank you. Okay, so next we have a slide prepared by Ted, also talking from the community acceptance point of view. So let's have a discussion.
Great. So, I'm not a utility scale developer per se, but I did sleep in a Holiday Inn Express, so I can talk to the way utility, in truth, I've collaborated with a lot of utility scale projects, including offshore wind, including solar, and including those who have built onshore wind. And I've been involved in the community engagement process from when I was at the state to even now. And from the morning, there was a discussion about people just need to accept it. And I will tell you that there's a lot of pushback in the community when we have empty roofs for people to say, why are we building these things that are in our view plane when we haven't taken up all our roof space? It's really critical, and we do have, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later in a little bit, we do have quite a bit of capacity on our roofs to exploit before we start getting to more of the utility scale. And there are some barriers that we need to work through. If you're following the news, ITC's taken some significant hits, potentially at a national level and at a state level. Codes are challenging. So there are a lot of barriers and a lot of headwind, but as I'll, bottom line up front, fully 1/4 to 1/3 of the energy on our grid could come from our rooftops if we get our act together to get there. And rooftop solar or distributed energy resources, when they really kind of began a significant presence about 15 years ago, they were challenging for the grid. They would cause overvoltage situations. They would put more energy on distributed circuits than the utility was really built to handle. But we are in, this is not your grandfather's solar anymore. Solar today with smart inverters, they are built to be good grid citizens, and with good grid service programs, they can be great grid citizens. And that's what we really need to do. They're going to be transformational for our grid because the technology is there for them to be so. And the last bullet point, I know that Inter-Island Solar has a PV panel recycling program. And we're starting to see, I just saw on the news today that a battery recycling company went into bankruptcy with facilities in 2 states on the mainland. But that is a part of the growing process. Those facilities didn't go into bankruptcy. Somebody's going to buy them and continue to put them into service. Global Crossing went into bankruptcy in like 2001. That wasn't the end of fiber around the world. That was really the beginning of cheap communications around the world. The economic system that we have in place is going to continue to rebuild itself, and recycling means that we're going to have a full life cycle that's appropriate for these energy resources that we're building out.
Thanks, Ted. So I'd like to move on to the next topic unless, Joe, if you want to say anything.
Well, I just think it's amazing what Leilani's doing. I mean, I'm going to talk about this later, but I talked to so many developers of power, energy facilities, and I ask about all the factors that scare them. And the thing that scares them the most is the community, because even if their project is approved, the community can come back and disapprove it. And so I just think it's amazing what you're doing to have the community build its own power plants and energy facilities. It's still an experiment in the works, but I mean, I just think that's awesome. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, second, to have reliable power. So not only are old fossil-fired units expensive and inefficient, and I really thank the Hawaii State Energy Office for the slide making that point this morning. They're breaking down. We're worried about that. So it's very important that in addition to taking care of that issue, the new renewable energy projects come online on time. They are able to be completed and come online. So let's start with Joe Kent. Joe, please tell us about your research and the reasons for project cancellation.
Thank you. I've been thinking about becoming a therapist because whenever someone in Hawaii has a project, a major project that they're trying to pursue that fails, they come to the Grassroot Institute and tell us their story. This happens so often. We're not even asking them. They just come in and call our office. This has happened for years. I've been working there for 11 years now, and they've been talking about this, especially when it comes to housing. But now, more recently, they're talking about it on energy projects. And there is so many similarities there. Hawaii has the most regulations in the nations when it comes to land use and zoning restrictions, permitting as well. And they, I should say, I'm going to go through a list of the reasons that they say the projects are failing. Number one is cost increases. Of course, after the pandemic, no one thought that costs would spike as they did. You lock in a 40-year project agreement, and all of a sudden it doesn't pencil out. And this has happened again and again. Permitting and regulatory delays is what I was talking about. And I mean, if you look at the list of, I loved Leilani's list, flow chart there. But basically, there are so many layers of regulations. You've got the Land Use Commission, which is unique in Hawaii. Then there's if you might need to have environmental review, air quality permits, water permits, the community plan, island plan might play a factor. Building and construction, just regular building permits are a factor. All of these things are, small cuts that add up. The Public Utilities Commission, and yet another layer that's in every state, but nonetheless, fuel storage, federal layers. And so all of these layers add delays. Of course, community opposition, we've just talked about that, not in my backyard, especially in Hawaii. Soaring shipping freight rates, we saw this after the pandemic. I'm going to talk about shipping a little bit later. One that they keep talking to me about is the liabilities of liquidated damages. And so now I'm just voicing their opinion, the people who are worried about their projects failing. You lock in a contract. If you don't fulfill the contract at the right time frame, you have to pay liquidated damages, and that adds more risk, which creates an incentive to cancel your own project or to pull out. Lack of wiggle room for that is a big concern. Credit rating concerns, of course. There have been projects that have canceled because of credit rating concerns, awkward to talk about. And of course, land availability. It's just all the same land. They all want the same land between solar and housing and agriculture. So these are the main cancellation reasons that we're finding. And by the way, at the Grassroot Institute, we want to hear your story. So if there are major factors, please contact me. and at grassrootinstitute.org. I would love to know more because we want to study this issue further. Now, Paul, what are some policy options to put a bright spot on this? Solar app, this is a system whereby people can get their rooftop solar permitted quickly. This has been tried in a few states. Grassroot Institute wrote a report about this. It knocks down the permitting wait times from like 40 days to 0. Self-certification, of course, by right energy development, updating the floodplain rules. These are some other policies. I don't want to wonk out too much. And basically, these other ones here allow reducing allowable interventions and moving from discretionary approval to ministerial approval. These are broad statements, but basically, if you look statewide, nationwide, excuse me, at those states that do generate energy facilities quickly, they allow people to build. If somebody has a tract of land, they can build a power plant in certain states. Not so easy in Hawaii. And the Jones Act is a final factor that I'd like to talk about, especially with respect to liquid natural gas. So for those that don't know, the Jones Act is a law that states that any ship carrying goods from one American port to another American port be on an American ship. It has to be built in America, flagged American, crewed by Americans, and owned somewhat by Americans mostly. There are no Jones Act carriers capable of transporting liquid natural gas, though. So that means that trying to get liquid natural gas from the mainland United States is practically impossible. I mean, you might be able to do it on a rinky-dink barge or something, but doing it at scale is impossible. Now, this is a graph from the State Energy Office's report on how they're going to replace petroleum, how they recommend to anyways. And you can see down here at the bottom the amount of liquid natural gas in light gray. So basically, they're replacing it with LNG. But how are they going to do that at a price that's helpful for Hawaii? Now, we could get LNG from Canada, it's true, but it would be higher priced than from the mainland US. We could get it from Mexico. That's the closest point from Mexico. But there's a pipe from the US LNG facilities to Mexico, and the Jones Act has a stipulation that if something goes through a pipe to a different country and then goes onto a ship, then it's disallowed on a foreign ship to Hawaii. So, they thought of everything. So basically, I'm just advocating for some kind of reform like they did in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico does have an LNG ship exemption. Hawaii doesn't, and I think we should.
Thank you. I think we'll probably have some interesting conversations about that one too. So the clicker is available for, no, it's good for Ted, because the next topic is to have affordable electricity. We are in the middle of the Pacific, no cheap electric power from neighboring states, capital constraints, market uncertainty. What's a person to do? Ted, do you have some thoughts on this?
Okay, so this is where I say that distributed generation is a Rodney Dangerfield of energy in Hawaii. It doesn't get any respect. There we go, thank you. In 2024, DG accounted for about 18% of the energy on the Hawaii grid. That's almost 1/5 of the total amount of energy on the grid is coming from energy produced by systems that the utility didn't pay for and the PUC didn't have to approve, and it's not based on the credit rating of the utility. That is a tremendous opportunity. We have about 100,000 interconnections that are just residential, not even commercial. Across the HECO service areas. And the governor and the PUC and the utility have all set a goal of let's get another 50,000 rooftops, which there's about There's about 400,000 residences in Hawaii. About half of those are single-family homes. And so if we're able to do another 50,000 single-family homes, that'll get us another 350 megawatts of solar. Today, residentials are about 700 megawatts. So that gets us close to 80% of single-family homes, and you could conceivably say that that's really kind of approaching the limit. A lot of homes are shaded. The roofs are not in any shape for putting solar on it, and some owners, because rooftop solar is a decision of the owner of the home, they may say, I don't want to do that, right? So that's a good goal that and everybody's agreeing, the PUC, the governor, the utility, let's get another 50,000. Well, what that leaves off is down in the bottom right, we actually have around 200,000 multi-dwelling unit residences, which includes towers, which aren't really good candidates for solar, but probably somewhere around 60 to 80,000 homes, MDUs, whether they're condos, whether they're low-income housing. There's a great opportunity that largely hasn't been pursued because the barriers to doing those, and in surveys, and I'm using kind of hand-wavy figures because it's hard to get good numbers, okay? But in my experience, the utility would tell you we're at 40 to 50% of single-family homes, but really we're at about a tenth of that of NBUs. If you go you drive along H1 and you can look and you see all these condos, their roofs are all bare. Whereas in fact, if you go into Holu, it's stunning because you can stand in the street and on one side of the street, single-family homes, almost all of them have solar. And on the other side of the street, the MDUs, all their roofs are bare. So there's a tremendous opportunity that probably is worth another 250 to 300 megawatts of solar. This is the
Can I
area
add
of focus.
something on that? So I am the president of a condo, and we're considering doing a rooftop solar project, right? We're also trying to figure out how to pay for our new insurance bill, which is devastating us. And we're trying to update all the old elevators and cracks in the stairs. And, so that, I'm wondering if that's a factor in why MDUs don't have this.
How many stories is your?
4. Four.
That's really kind of, I would say, the limit of what you could do economically with because the load is all individually metered, and above that you just don't have enough roof space to make it make sense. But up to 4, you could make a significant impact for each unit, and that's what my company focuses on. My CEO, my partner, doesn't like me saying this, but we like to pick the fruit at the top of the tree. We do the hard things. Everybody talks about low-hanging fruit. Yeah, we let other companies do that. And there's plenty of low-hanging fruit. There's, 50,000 rooftops of single family still out there for the rest of the solar industry to go do. We're trying to do the hard ones. So, Joe, we should talk about this.
Right.
So all that together, the bottom line is a quarter to a third of the energy on our grid should be coming from rooftops. And on Oahu especially, that's a really big deal because Oahu doesn't have the room, and we've known this for almost 20 years when the Department of Energy came at the beginning of the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative, and they did analysis that said that Oahu doesn't have the resource to get to 100%. So we can, overall, all the islands get to a quarter to a third of energy coming from rooftops. I think that's achievable if we get through these barriers of permitting, finance, so forth.
You got the clicker.
Oh, I have the next slide, and I have the clicker. I do have the next slide. Okay, and it's very disappointing. It's frustrating, being in the solar industry that the legislature gave no money to HGIA. HGIA is what funds getting third-party solar onto low to middle income houses. And all the rich people, they've got their solar. So what we're doing now is we're penalizing the people who are late adopters and the people that need some assistance getting solar under their roofs. Also, I'm a little frustrated with what we've seen coming out of grid service programs. BYOD Plus is, it's not as anemic as BYOD was, but it still is not where I think it needs to be, both in terms of the compensation that gets it over the hump. There are, even for battery bonus, which had better compensation, I know of people that have looked at this and said, it is not worth it to do this. And I think it's important for us to have as many systems as possible. When a quarter to a third of the energy that's on the grid is coming from systems that the utility has no fingers into and is not connected to and can't influence as it comes, then you have a grid that is not well managed, in my view. And when the BYOD is capped at 50 megawatts, we're talking about in the next 5 years getting 7 times that coming on the grid. You really have a program that is a dip your toe in the water program, and this is the 6th iteration that we've been through it, and we should be well past dipping our toe in the water. We need to have a grid services program for distributed assets that brings those systems to bear to enable the whole community and is an anchor that keeps them on the grid and shuts down grid defection. And the utility itself is still mostly, they've gone through some transitions, I know, but they're still not a utility that's designed with the end in mind from a structural standpoint. I think that there needs to be kind of the leadership needs to evaluate it, or how do we structure ourselves for the grid that we're going to have, not for the grid that we've had. And with that,
Okay.
I'll hand over the clicker.
Or you can just push the button. There's only one more slide. Okay, this is summing up. So wanted to give the panelists a chance to talk to each other. I've heard some, a bunch of very insightful comments, some level of frustration, some level of hope, good examples. But I wanted to give you guys a chance to communicate with each other. For example, on the community vision part of it, do you think, maybe Grassroots Institute, do you think that something like what Molokai did could work?
Yeah, well, it's funny when you read all the state reports and the energy reports and everything. You've got HECO, and then you've got Kauai over here. And as the shining example of, wow, they've achieved so much, they're a co-op. And then I just think, I wonder if co-ops could work on other islands. What you're doing, Leilani, sounds similar to a co-op, would you say? And what is the potential to starting a formal co-op there?
We are discovering or getting a good reality check on what it means to be a co-op and be the owner of a energy project, let alone the whole grid. If you ask the community what they want for their energy future, they will say community ownership all the way. And I think a big part of that is just continuing to feel like they haven't had a say at all. And by owning it is the only way we can ensure that we do have all of the say, or at least a balanced say of like what our energy future looks like.
And how has the process been? Has it been really contentious, or it's very easy to agree on things?
Yeah, I think it hasn't been very contentious, actually. It hasn't been quick and easy, for sure. A lot of myth busting, the centering around education of understanding our options and our grid has been super important. The other piece that's also really important for our energy co-op on Molokai and for the Hui and all this work is community staffing. Nobody cares about the community more than the people that live there. And so even though it is difficult to find the right expertise on island, even though the community is responsible oftentimes for raising all the funding to hire professional place-based staff, it has made the world of difference. It's taken every contentious conversation to a like solution-focused conversation. It's able to take, you know, the sometimes angry community comments and translate it into the technical solution that addresses it.
So if a developer came in and looked at your plan and said, I want to do component X, you think the community would support it? And
Depends. We're very Pilina-based, right? We want to make sure that people we partner with, the people that are doing projects on Molokai, are trustworthy, are going to be accountable for the end-of-life plan, are going to be up and up with us, are going to like prioritize the things that the community values, not just profit. Of course, we want it to be profitable and like self-sustaining and a win-win-win. And so I think that's the main reason why the line for pre-development has moved down. It's the community's way of making sure that when we get to choosing a developer, all of the things that we really care for are in there, and the developer, whoever it may be, can, you know, connect the dots on the actual technical solution.
But what's the urgency that you feel there though? Because for Maui, we're on Maui right now, and you've got, you know, power plants that are retiring in a couple years. The Kahului power plant is retiring in what, 2028, and then Ma'alaya is 2030, and maybe my dates are wrong, but that's pretty close. If on Maui, we don't generate the power to replace those factors, then you know, the people on our email list, like I said, 40,000 people are following us. They're telling us we're worried about blackouts, brownouts, and so I'm wondering how that's going to play out on Maui Island. But I'm wondering if that's also a factor on Molokai.
Yeah, I think one thing that brings people to the table to have these discussions is we're kind of already living the nightmare scenario right now. Our grid is old, our grid is not reliable. You know, the people that live on the far ends of the island get a lot of brownouts and blackouts, which blow their essential appliances. And we're a subsistence-based community, so when your freezer blows, oh man, you know, and there's no place on Molokai to get large appliances and stuff like that. So there's definitely the urgency that we feel in our wallets. And there's also an urgency of, we know that continuing to rely on diesel is not good for our Aina and for our community, and we really care about those things. But we are not willing to sacrifice just rushing a project that moves the needle on, you know, how we produce our energy. We want to make sure that the solutions we put in place that are going to be for the next 20 years are holistic and address other community issues at the same time. So like when you were talking about rooftop solar, if you had asked me 4 years ago, what does a community want? 100% rooftop solar. Everyone was like, why can't we just do rooftop solar? We've got 500 systems already up. We hear from our neighbors that this is like amazing, right? They've gotten a really good deal. Their bill went down to 20 bucks. Why can't we just have that? And through our learning process of understanding that our grid is already at max capacity, hosting-wise, the majority of our homes are, roofs are not eligible and would have to have upgrades. The majority of our community rents their home instead of own, all of those factors. And the most important part, or the most like eye-opening part, is that having rooftop solar for everybody, like how we wanted, doesn't address our sustainability issues of wanting to make sure that our critical infrastructure is secure for our whole island. I kind of forget what I was going to add.
Well, I don't want to hog the questions, so anyone else?
Yeah, I'm just thinking because I don't want to say things that are too far out there, but I think that the hosting capacity is, you know, the reality is that most roofs, like we talked about, you know, we went to NREL in '08, and they said then that, you know, you could net zero a building of up to 3 stories, you know, and there's not a lot of 3-story plus buildings on Molokai, right? So hosting capacity, you know, is really a grid perspective that's rapidly becoming overcome by events, you know, no longer relevant, because Energy storage means that, hey, the whole duck curve issue kind of goes away because we can meet load. We don't have to export energy into that duck curve. We can store energy that's produced in the middle of the day and deliver it when load, you have the peak in the evening to that home. We have one of our clients that we installed. It lives in Makiki, in the middle of downtown, right below Punch Bowl. And he had a neighbor. In order for him to upgrade his electrical system, he was being required to put a pole in his neighbor's yard. And his neighbor wasn't interested in doing that. Plus, it would have cost him $50,000 to do this. So he just went off grid in his home. He overbuilt a system. He removed the meter. And he's been operating for 2 years off-grid, and he's had less outages than his neighbors in that time. And so solar can definitely enable sustainable and reliable systems coupled with energy storage. The technology, it's not that it's coming, it's here. And again, grid services are a glue that draws those customers to stay on the grid when they have the ability to say, and typically it's early adopters that are going to do that, but as we've seen, at EVs 10 years ago, 15 years ago, only early adopters have them. Now, a lot of people have them. It's not an early adopter thing anymore.
Okay, so another thing that had come up was the reliability, which is not only on the generation side, but it's also the poles and lines and the rest of the system. I'm wondering if the CRAP process considered that, and if it has any, if you have any suggestions for upgrading Molokai. Are you able to save any money on the fuel costs that would help to fund some of the other infrastructure improvements, or is that a separate thing, or how does that fit together? Or is it just like everybody is like it costs money to keep things running, and that's whether or not you're running it on renewables or not? I'm just wondering how is the CRAP considering that piece of it?
Like the grid upgrade pieces? As we move forward with our energy planning as a community, there's 3 main checkpoints. One is the technical feasibility checkpoint. The other is the economic. And when we look at the projects that we're designing and weigh them against each other, one of the things the community asks to see is what is the capital cost and what is the grid upgrade cost. And what we found out is that every single project, even if you just add rooftop solar, requires grid upgrades. And I'm not sure whose kuleana it is to shoulder the grid upgrades. It kind of feels like, it is a huge impossible barrier to ask a community to pay for upgrading the grid and get renewable energy at the same time. It's definitely a reason why people are the projects that the community have designed so far, similar to Kauai, don't lower our electric bills. They go up by a little bit, and it's taking the time to digest that as a community, understand okay, they're not going down, but they will stay steady. And because these projects are holistic, these are the additional benefits that don't usually get weighed or measured in the regular energy development process.
Okay, because I forget whose slide, maybe it was one of yours, Joe, that one of the barriers to developing the projects is that the interconnection piece is paid for by the developer.
Well, and that's something, again, our followers, I've got 40,000 people who are really skeptical, and they tell me those things, and one of the things they're skeptical about is the renewable energy portfolio standards and the ability to achieve 100%. Now, if you look at the state report, all the state reports, it all says that it's technically feasible, but what does that mean? Does that mean it's practically feasible, or what? And I mean, if you look at developing technologies in any space, there's a law of diminishing returns. We saw this with the rail project. It's easy at first, and it gets harder as you go. And I think that's happening in energy too. It's going to get harder as we go, not easier. But the way that the renewable energy portfolio mandate is structured is like a law of accelerated returns or something. It's supposed to get easier. And so, our followers are very skeptical about that and think all the time about this triangle of reliability, renewability, and affordability. And a lot of people say you can only have two, not all three. And of course, you want three. One that actually hits all three is liquid natural gas, but I already talked about the Jones Act aspect, so I won't go down that road. So.
Okay, I just want to connect several things. When we're talking about a good community planning process, let's say it's successful and the community identifies good locations, good technologies, they understand their options and the barriers, and they don't expect perfection right off the bat. And then projects can get built and they're cost effective. If more people can stay attached to the grid, then that helps to reduce the overall infrastructure cost. It addressed some of the security issues as well. How do we bring that model to a community such as Oahu, where you don't have as much of the folks showing up, percentage of the population, in a cooperative manner? How can we bring that view of, by working together, everybody benefits, but it takes time? And I'm putting that out to the community right here. If you have a suggestion, well, for one thing is come to conferences and talk to people about actual solutions and actual technologies. Mm-hmm. But if you have a solution for this question of how to get those three community energy priorities to not only be supporting each other, but to actually be communicated to the broader audience of Hawaii residents. What do you recommend? We have a bunch of questions here, but this is focusing on solutions. And a lot of the questions are similar to that. How do you take a successful model and communicate the potential to folks who are focused on how little individual pieces are not perfect?
I am going to try to summarize what you're saying. A community approach might work on a small island, but when you get to an island with a lower population, but when you get to a large population, does it work anymore? That's kind of what your question. I interpret it to be, anyways.
It takes more marketing, I guess.
Yeah, and but I think inviting alternative viewpoints, like myself, by the way, and so many people that I talk to, feel left out of the conversation, I think. And so I feel so honored to be here and to share that. I apologize if it's abrasive or anything like that. But, I think a lot of people who are friends of our institute would very much support all kinds of projects and get behind these things if they knew about them. But also, if you have so many steps in the process that require community input, then that by itself is a barrier. So what I'm advocating for is a more ministerial approach and a less discretionary approach. Put the discretions at 1 point or 2 points, not 10 points down the chain. I mean, this is what they do in other states where they open up a one-stop shop, where at the state level you can go through all of the factors, and if it's approved, then it's approved once, and they get all of the permits and approvals that they needed for everything else, even at the county level. And so in Hawaii, we have multiple layers and shops that one has to hop through. So, I mean, I think that's part of it. So.
Okay, and I have some suggestions here from the audience.
I want to answer that real fast.
Oh, go ahead.
So I think the short answer to your question of like how do you get communities to participate is you go to them. on Molokai, like we've never done energy planning before in this way. And we had to start somewhere, and we started with asking the community, how do you want this information? What information do you want? You know, do you want us to come to your house? Do you want us to like make a event right by your house? Would you like it on social media? Would you like a dispatch article? What do you want? And communities will straight up tell you what they want. And this is, again, me advocating for hiring the people to do this work that are actually from those communities. They know their communities the best. They probably have a really good idea of how to reach everybody that's needed in order to like garner community support for our energy project. But right now, there's no steady stream of support for communities to do this work. Molokai has had to do like the Herculean lift of getting all of our own funding and building our own team and getting technical expertise, which is not impossible, I will say. And I hear a lot of people at this conference, you know, giving props to Molokai, but then saying, oh, but that couldn't happen anywhere else. But you guys never try it. I promise you. Get yourself, hire the community-led team, you know, and just try. Ask the community exactly what they want, and 9 times out of 10, they will tell you exactly what they need. And then you go from there.
Okay, thanks, and we all applaud, and we definitely agree. So a couple of suggestions here. One is an observation that engagement needs to be community-led and hyper-localized, which is true because every community has its own priorities, its own concerns, right? I mean, if it's the distribution or transmission line to your area that is not reliable and you're having your outages, you have a different set of concerns than somebody who is going to be right next to something that's being proposed to be built and so forth. Thanks for that one. One is talking about California has seen a rise in community-driven renewable generation through utility microgrid incentivization programs and community choice aggregation programs as load service. So I guess the question was, is there any thought of coordinating with California communities attempting similar efforts? You guys had a lot of work with other examples from elsewhere, right, on your technical review, and you had national labs and so forth.
Yeah, we did. We looked at examples of floating solar and pump storage hydro from all over, and the community got to cherry pick the pieces that we really liked. It helped us set our parameters for what we would want out of a project like that on our island, which then guided the technical team to only look if there's this, and this.
Yeah. Ted, how about the community choice aggregation programs or utility microgrid incentivization? Just wondering if any of that
Say it again.
fits. Microgrids.
Well, microgrids, I get frustrated with the term microgrid because it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. What we do notionally are DC microgrids in associations of apartment owners or for low-income housing projects. A lot of times what people mean in a microgrid is they talk about like a community area. You know, UH notionally has talked about doing a microgrid in Manoa campus. The challenge with microgrids is that we have given on a larger scale, is that we have given a utility a service area that they're supposed to serve. And so how do you know, at what point does that become a weird thing where basically if it's just people in a census tract that you're connecting in a microgrid, in essence what you're doing is a micro utility, right? So, and for what purpose? Typically, the purpose for a microgrid would be for resilience. So, you know, I would say that if you're going to do something in a census tract where you've got a mix of people and different associations and they're all voters, that's really what they're associated by, then that's something that the utility could do. But if you're doing it in an association of apartment owners that are all one legal entity, that's a different animal, and that's doable today, and that's not a utility. That's what, I've been doing that for like a decade, doing that.
So that almost sounds like the beginning part of the project on Molokai, where people said, we're going to do this on an individual basis, and everybody can do it, and then they looked at it and realized, hey, by working together and having the system serve more than just the individual unit, because some of the homes can't have solar, some are shaded and so forth, they start looking beyond their single home or beyond maybe even their single community, and then they get interested in what can be done on a broader basis. So I know we're running out of time. We got about 5 minutes left.
One additional thought there
Yes.
is that we have been doing a lot of things, kind of extensions of what we've been doing to date. And if we really want to change things, we need to be willing to blow up what we currently have, right? So get the utility to do what happened on Kauai and sell to a cooperative group. Form different organizations that have a legal ability to do things, decertify the utility in an area. And I'm not saying anything different against the utility. They've obviously had some challenging roads that they've rode through, and we all support them as a part of our community. But if we want to do something different, we can't continue to do the same thing and think that it's going to be different.
Well, I was just thinking about the volunteer aspect of what your approach, not your approach, but the Molokai approach is. With volunteers, that works for a while, but then the incentive problem happens, which is that they're not paid. And I'm just wondering if there's a way for the grid to pay back the people of Molokai, and that could create some sort of virtuous circle and sort of private organization of members who actually get paid to do the work to upgrade the grid and so on. Or is it all just voluntary? We all have to change the world for free. I mean,
I definitely think that, as a community, we're doing the job of others. And there's money for it. So, invest in your community. If you say community expertise is important, put your money where your mouth is. Hire that technical team. Don't make them do it all for free. That's how movements die out, is people doing it for free because they care. Support communities to help you also reach our shared goals.
I think that's an excellent way to wrap this up. Let's thank our panelists and continue the conversation later. Thank you.